At 7:10 on a Tuesday in Pittsburgh, my back tire exploded in front of the courthouse, and the sound made a pigeon lift off like a gray balloon. I had bought the bike the night before from a guy named Travis who told me, with a serious face, that the squeak added character. Now the squeak was gone, replaced by the hiss of failure. I hopped to the curb, heart racing, and stared at the torn rubber. A few people looked at me with that quick city glance that means, I see you, but good luck, man. I stood there, holding a bike that leaned like a sleepy dog, and remembered how brave I'd felt leaving my apartment that morning. I was going to become a bike-to-work person. I had packed a banana and a tiny pump. I had even rolled my pant leg like I'd seen in videos. Then the tire gave its opinion. There was a bus stop bench nearby. I flipped the bike over, set the seat on the sidewalk, and tried to look confident. The chain winked at me with grease. I pulled off the tire like it was a stubborn lid. The inner tube was pinched and torn along a crease, like it had been waiting for this moment. A crossing guard in a bright vest stopped beside me and nodded as if we were co-workers in the same line of work. Pinch flat, he said. He was right. He kept walking, and I felt strangely encouraged. I had never fixed a tire on the street. I had watched a video at midnight and told myself it looked easy. It wasn't. The little pump coughed like an old cat. My hands grew sticky with black dust. A lawyer in a navy suit asked if I needed help. I wanted to say no, because pride, but I said, actually, do you know where I can buy a tube? He pointed up Grant Street. 3 blocks. There's a shop with a bell on the door. They open at 8. It was 7:15. I thanked him, and he hurried across the crosswalk, swinging his briefcase like a bell of his own. While I waited, I discovered a surprise. Tucked inside the hollow of my seat post was a piece of paper rolled like a tiny scroll. At first, I thought it was a receipt, but the paper was soft and thin, and on it, in a neat hand, someone had written, "Make it roll, and it will roll back to you." Under the sentence there was a small arrow drawn in pen, pointing to a date from last summer. I read it twice, then slid it into my wallet. It felt like a fortune cookie, but also like a dare. My hands were smudged black. I wiped them on my cuff and told myself I'd keep the bike, even if the seat contained messages from the past. The shop door did have a bell, just as the lawyer said. The place smelled like rubber and chain oil. A woman behind the counter had a smear of grease on her cheek and the calm of someone who had seen 100 flat tires before breakfast. I held up the tube like a trophy. "First day riding to work," I said. "Congratulations," she said, and it didn't sound sarcastic. She sold me a tube and showed me how to pinch the bead, lift it with the lever, and ease the tire back on. Her hands were quick and gentle, like she was playing a small instrument. "Don't overfill," she said. "Squeeze and listen for a kind of soft firmness. Your hands will learn it." Soft firmness. I like that. I paid, thanked her again, and felt something steady settle inside me. Back on the sidewalk, I finished the repair. A kid waiting for the bus watched my hands with a scientist's interest. "You fixing it?" he asked. "Trying," I said. "You're doing it," he said in a flat voice that still sounded like belief. The tire finally sat right. I pumped until it felt, yes, soft firm. I celebrated by eating my banana, which tasted like effort. When I swung the bike back onto its wheels, the frame looked proud. I felt proud too. I rolled down the hill toward the river, and the city opened like a folded map. At the office, I arrived 10 minutes late and sweaty. My boss glanced at my rolled-up pant leg and smiled. "Knew you?" she asked. "Trying it on," I said. All day, I felt taller, the way you feel when you make a small promise to yourself and keep it. At lunch, I cleaned the chain behind the building and wiped the frame with a paper towel. I found a tiny ding near the fork and felt fond of it, the way you feel about a freckle on your own face. On my way home, the evening air smelled like pizza and hot breaks. I coasted past a mural of a riverboat and thought about the note under the seat. Make it roll, and it will roll back to you. It sounded like the city's own rule. The next morning, I carried a hand-lettered sign in my backpack. Air and advice. Free. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted to see what would happen if I gave away the only two things I had learned so far: how to pump a tire and how not to panic. I set the sign outside my apartment building near a patch of sidewalk where the curb forms a gentle bowl. The first customer was a woman in scrubs whose front tire looked tired in the way a face looks at the end of a long shift. I pumped, she thanked me, and I watched her ride away with a little wave. I felt something roll back to me, something light. That night, I taped a cleaner copy of the sign to the railing. By Friday, a pattern formed. I left for work a little early, offered air to strangers, and rode a different route home each time, exploring. I learned which alley smelled like fresh bread and which block always had a kind of bright wind that tastes like the river even when you can't see the water. When the city's hills tried to argue with me, I stood on the pedals and counted in short breaths. 1 hill, 2 hill, 3 hill, done. I slept well, legs humming, mind quiet. The note in my wallet took on weight, like a coin I liked to touch. I didn't tell anyone about it. It felt better to treat it as an inside joke between me and the bike, between me and the city. On the second Saturday, something new happened. A man with a long beard and a tiny dog brought me a flat tire and a worried face. "I can pay you," he said. "It's free," I said. I replaced the tube with the kid I kept in my bag, slow and careful, and the tiny dog watched, nose tilted. When I finished, the man looked at me like I'd solved a riddle. "You're the bike guy," he said. The title embarrassed me and made me smile at the same time. "Not really," I said, but the dog already believed it, and that made 2 of us. As they walked away, I looked up at the windows of my building and saw myself reflected in the glass. A man with hands not clean, not dirty, just used. I felt like I had joined the city in a small, decent way, and the city had nodded back. The next week, the city changed gears. News spread in a small way, the kind of news that rides on coffee shop chatter and neighbor porch waves. I started getting hello nods from people I didn't know yet. I'm not famous, I told myself. I was just the guy with a pump and a sign. Still, it's a strange feeling to be recognized for something so simple. I made a second sign and left it under the first. Small fixes, maybe. The maybe was important. I knew a few things now. How to patch a tube, how to seat a stubborn bead, how to adjust a brake that squealed like a gull. But the world of bikes is wide and contains mysteries. On Tuesday evening, I stopped at a corner store for a cold tea, and the owner, a tall man who always wore a baseball cap, looked down at my hands. "You the pump guy?" he said. I nodded, and he handed me a box from under the counter. "Someone left this with me," he said. "Said it was for you." Inside the box were 2 patch kits, a set of sturdy tire levers, and a small note written on cardboard. "Make it roll." That line again. My heart did a little wheelie. I showed the owner the note from my wallet, and he laughed. "Looks like you got a fan club," he said. I carried the box home like a fragile cake. By Wednesday, I had a tiny ritual. I set out the sign, laid the tools on a clean towel, and filled a small bowl with soapy water to find leaks. While I worked, the city gave me small gifts. A woman told me the history of the building across the street. A bus driver taught me a trick for crossing tracks at a better angle. A kid named Mateo, the same kid from the bus stop, started showing up early and handing me valve caps like he was dealing playing cards. He was 9 and wore a t-shirt with a dinosaur on a skateboard. He had a careful way of watching that made me feel like a coach. On Friday, a man in a suit stood on the sidewalk, rocking heel to toe, watching me fix a chain that had jumped. "Do you charge?" he asked. "Only in gratitude," I said. He smiled like that line came with a spreadsheet. I'm Eric, he said. I manage the building on the corner. I like what you're doing. Do you want to use the little courtyard on Saturdays? He pointed to a shaded square with a tree and a bench, usually empty except for fallen leaves. People could roll in, and you wouldn't be blocking the sidewalk. I said yes too fast, and then again at a normal speed. That night, I bought a box of donut holes and a big jug of lemonade, and felt like I was preparing for a school fair. Saturday morning arrived soft and blue. I set up under the tree, taped the signs to the fence, and put the donut holes in a big bowl. I even made a simple flyer. Air Day, 9 to 12, free. Bring your bike. Bring your questions. Bring a friend. The first hour was a quiet trickle. A college student with a rusty chain. A nurse who worked nights and needed a rear light. A dad with a trailer for a toddler who fell asleep holding a graham cracker. The courtyard filled with the soft talk people use when they are not in a hurry. I noticed something strange and nice. When someone waited for me to finish, they didn't stare at their phone the way people usually do. They watched the hands, the pump, the turning wheel. Maybe it was because a wheel asks to be watched while it spins. Around 10:30, a rumor rolled in, pushed by a guy with a loud voice and a louder opinion. That bike, he said, pointing at mine, which leaned against the fence. Looks like my neighbor's bike that got stolen last year. He wasn't accusing me directly, but the air shifted. I felt the ground tilt under my shoes. My heart threw a wrench. It's not stolen, I said too quickly. The guy shrugged and took a donut hole. I'm just saying, he said, it looks familiar. He wandered out with a tube under his arm, leaving the silence buzzing. The rest of the morning wore a small shadow. I kept working, but my cheeks felt hot. After noon, when the line was gone, I packed up and wheeled my bike to the shop with the bell. The same woman was there, calm as ever. I told her what the man had said. She listened, then rolled my bike into the back and checked the serial number on the bottom bracket, wiping away grease with a clean rag. I texted Travis, the guy who sold it to me, fingers awkward on the screen. He replied right away. Bought it at a church sale last summer on Butler Street. Don't worry. The shopwoman looked up the number and nodded. No active records, she said. And the style is common. A lot of frames like this are cousins. Cousins. The word relaxed something inside me, but not all the way. That night I lay awake and imagined every version of the story. In the saddest version, the bike was stolen and I was part of the sadness without meaning to be. In another version, the bike had traveled a simple path through garage sales and stoops, the way chairs and lamps do. I pulled the note from my wallet. Make it roll, and it will roll back to you. The sentence looked the same, but it felt different, like it had just been said out loud in a new room. I put the note on my dresser, like a small lighthouse to steady the dark. Sunday brought rain. I listened to it on the window and made pancakes with too much cinnamon. In the afternoon, the clouds opened, and the city smelled like metal and grass. I rode slow along the river trail and told myself, out loud, that I would do one more thing. I would try to find the bike's path. Not a detective story, just a line of simple questions. I posted on a neighborhood board with the serial number, asked at the church on Butler Street, and sent a message to the guy who runs the corner store with the baseball cap. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wanted to ride without the small stone of doubt in my shoe. On Monday, Mateo met me on the sidewalk with news. My uncle knows the church, he said. He says they have a yard sale again next weekend. We can go. It made me grin. On Wednesday, the building manager Eric put a real sign on the gate. Courtyard Bike Hour, Saturdays. He had even drawn a tiny wheel as the dot on the I. I didn't ask how he made it look like that. It felt official in a way that made my stomach flutter and my shoulders relax. People kept coming. Someone left me a hand pump in a little gift bag with the words, "Thank you, bike guy," written in marker. I kept telling myself I wasn't the bike guy. but the cap fit, and it kept the sun out of my eyes. The next Saturday began with the kind of sky that makes everything look like it was just washed. Mateo and I walked to the church on Butler Street with 2 slices of banana bread wrapped in napkins, because if you want to ask a favor, it might help to bring something sweet. The church smelled like wood and coffee. A woman in a blue sweater sat behind a table stacked with folded t-shirts that said Community Day. I explained the situation, careful to keep my voice even. Last summer, I said, someone donated a bike. This summer, I bought that bike from someone who bought it from you. I'm just trying to check the story. The woman listened, took a bite of banana bread, and smiled at Mateo, who stood beside me like a second question mark. We keep a little notebook, she said. She pulled a thin binder from under the table and flipped the pages with the soft sound of paper whispering. Here, she said. Last July. She tapped a line with her pen. Blue steel frame. Donated by K. Kennedy. Sold to Travis C. $40. My lungs filled in a new way, like I had been breathing shallow and didn't know it. Can I meet K. Kennedy? I asked. If she comes today, the woman said, she'll be in a red ball cap. She always helps with the raffle. At the courtyard, the morning gathered like it was happy to be together. People rolled in with tiny problems and left lighter. Eric swept leaves with extra care. Mateo became the official bell ringer, tapping the shop bell I'd bought, once for help, twice for done, and 3 times for donut hole break. Around 10, a woman in a red ball cap walked in with a shy wave. She had gray hair and a careful way of smiling, like someone who has practiced for photographs at family events. I hear you might be riding my old bike, she said. The courtyard went quiet the way a kitchen goes quiet when a cake is checked. I wiped my hands on the towel and nodded. If that's true, I said, then thank you. Mrs. Kennedy laughed. I bought it for my husband when our car was in the shop, she said. He rode it twice and said the seat felt like a wooden spoon. It sat in the garage for 3 years. We donated it last July because we needed the space for a chest freezer. That detail, chest freezer, made the story solid in a way nothing else could. You don't invent a chest freezer. Mateo asked, did you put a note in the bike? Mrs. Kennedy blinked, then looked pleased. Yes, she said. I like to leave little messages and things. It's my silly habit. I write them for strangers. I wrote that line and tucked it in the seat. I wondered who would find it. I pulled out my wallet and handed her the paper. She read it, then pressed it back into my hand with a pat, the way a grandmother returns a cookie she wants you to enjoy. Looks like it rolled back to the right person, she said. I felt the courtyard stretch and relax, as if the place itself had taken a deep breath. The rumor from last week dissolved like sugar in tea. The loud-voiced guy wasn't there to apologize, but in my head I let him off the hook. People are messy. Wheels wobble. We keep writing. For the rest of the morning, a small joy settled over everything. A man who never spoke more than 1 word at a time said 3 sentences in a row about his derailleur. A teenager with purple shoelaces learned to patch his first tube, then stayed to help 2 more people. Eric brought out a fan and an extension cord that he had labeled with blue tape. Mateo announced a raffle in a serious voice. The prize was a bell that sounded like laughter. Mrs. Kennedy stayed and told me about the chest freezer, which turned out to be for storing extras from a garden. Tomatoes like to brag, she said. They all ripen at once. The last person of the day was Mr. Brooks, a neighbor who lived 2 doors down and had mastered the art of looking busy while doing nothing at all. He always wore a hat with a tiny feather and gave me the kind of nod that means, I see you, but I am saving my energy. He didn't ride a bike, but he carried a metal walker with 1 wheel that screamed when it turned. He set it down and said, You fix wheels. Do you fix these? I told him I would try. I cleaned the axle, added a drop of oil, and adjusted the nut until the scream became a whisper. He took a slow lap around the courtyard, the walker rolling smooth, and when he returned, he put a hand on my shoulder. "Now you're the wheel guy," he said, and I felt the title land in a place that didn't make me want to shrug it off. By noon the shade had moved, and the day had the warm weight of a good job finished. We packed up slowly. I shook hands. Mateo collected the empty cups and stacked them like a tiny engineer. Mrs. Kennedy hugged me with one arm and told me to keep the note. Eric said I could leave the sign up all week if I wanted. I didn't want to. The courtyard had been a classroom and a kitchen and a front porch all at once. It had been the best room in the city for a few hours, and somehow it still felt like mine even as it returned to being a quiet square with a tree and a bench. On my ride home, the river flashed between buildings like a silver ribbon someone kept tucking away and then showing again. I took the long way on purpose. The hills didn't feel like enemies anymore. They felt like sentences in a language I had learned by breathing and pedaling and counting to 3 at a red light. I put my foot down and touched the note in my wallet with greasy fingers, not caring about the smudge. I thought about how many small things had rolled into this. A squeaky bike, a pinch flat, a shop bell, a kid with a dinosaur shirt, a rumor, a notebook in a church, a chest freezer, a hat with a feather. Maybe this is what the sentence meant. You push a good thing forward and it comes back in pieces, some with sugar on them, some with oil, some with the light weight of thanks. That evening, I sat on my stoop with a glass of iced tea and watched the street like a short, kind movie. People passed, wheels turned, and the city breathed. I felt ordinary in the way I love most. Tired feet, clean shirt, small plan for next Saturday. The bike leaned beside me, balanced with that quiet pride I had noticed on the first day. I reached over and spun the front wheel. It hummed and slowed and finally stopped, spoke shadows settling on the sidewalk. I didn't try to keep it moving. Not every motion needs a hand. Some things, once rolling, will find their own circle back.